The post station stood 2 stories tall, a silent monument in the desert of civilization. Inside, the rooms were vast, capable of housing 50 souls, yet for now, it served only as a sanctuary for Cand and his weary construction crew. Cand drifted into a daze, only to be awakened the next morning by a chorus of triumphant shouts. Outside, the workers were cheering, "We've hit water, line the bottom, don't let the sand collapse." Cand hurried down to the site. Where there had once been simple lime drawings, a stone well now stood, a miracle of engineering and system blessing. A timber and hemp water wheel turned vigorously, pulling up a bucket of clear, cool groundwater. A serenade rider took a cautious sip and nodded. "It is drinkable, my lord." "Refill the water skins," Cand commanded. "We depart shortly." Before leaving, Cand turned to the construction foreman. The man bowed low, his voice thick with flattery. "My lord, please do not forget to deliver the letter to Lord Fatties. Thank you so much." Cand smiled, though inwardly he felt a sharp pang of conflict. In his pocket lay a letter from Fatties' father. To deliver it might mean losing his finest Swadian general to the pull of home and family, yet Fatties was a man of chivalry and integrity. Cand sighed. It was better to give the letter freely than to hide it and risk a betrayal of trust. The journey north across the Nalan Desert was long. They rested at noon and galloped through the heat until finally, at dusk, the silhouette of sentry Oasis appeared on the horizon. 10 Swadian heavy cavalrymen charged out to meet them, their faces bright with joy. "Lord Cand, welcome back." "Thank you," Cand replied, his eyes scanning the dunes. "Where is Sir Fatties?" "Patrolling the north, my lord. Gnolls have returned. They come in an endless stream of sneak attacks." Cand's brow furrowed. "Gnolls here." Soon Fatties himself arrived, his armor splattered with fresh blood. "They are attacking like they have gone mad," Fatties reported grimly. "This is the second wave we have routed today. Something has changed in the north." The news was heavy, but Cand had one more duty to perform. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the parchment. "Fatties, this letter was delivered from Veruga. It is from your father." Fatties froze, his expression stunned as he stared at the seal. "My father's letter." Fatties lowered his head, staring at the family letter in Cand's hand with a heavy, complex gaze. In the world of chivalry, fratricide is the ultimate taboo, yet Fatties had killed his own brother for the sake of a hollow romance. He stood frozen, afraid to reach for the parchment, until Cand offered a gentle, encouraging nod. "My knight," Cand said softly, "having me hold your letter like this seems." Fatties snapped back to reality, his fingers trembling as he took the envelope. With a sharp intake of breath, he tore it open. As he read his father's words, tears began to roll down his cheeks. Suddenly, a glowing dialogue box flickered onto Cand's retina. The system chimed, "Mission complete. Reward, troop recruitment doubling permanent." The description was simple yet profound. This was a father's love, dissolving years of hatred and barriers through the power of forgiveness. Beside him, Fatties let out a sorrowful, broken sob. The wandering knight, once lost in his search for redemption, was now weeping like a child. His father had not only observed his deeds in Calradia, but had sent his affirmation. "The path you have walked," Cand sighed, feeling a pang of envy for such a bond, "has been watched all along. Your father is a true—" Cand thought of his own past as an orphan and of his distant father in this world, Duke Cameron. He shook his head to clear the fog. "So Fatties." Fatties wiped his face, his expression hardening into one of fierce loyalty. "My father appreciates my service to you," he declared. "I will continue to follow you with firm conviction." In his eyes, this is a new beginning for our family. Cand felt a wave of shame. He had secretly plotted ways to manipulate Fatties into staying, fearing the letter would call him home. But the deep, selfless investment of the knight's father made those schemes feel small and ridiculous. "My lord," Fatties continued, his voice regaining its strength, "my father knows of your struggles. He has sent a batch of supplies and personnel to sponsor your cause." Cand blinked, stunned. "Sponsorship?" "Yes," Fatties nodded. 200 peasants to work the land, 50 elite Swadian infantry to bolster your shield wall, and enough grain, dried meat, and sausage to last for months." Cand swallowed hard. This was a massive windfall. The peasants would solve the labor shortage in Durham, and the Tier 4 infantry would provide a steel defense to complement his Ravenston Rangers. Suddenly, a shout rang out from the watchtower. "My lord, a troop of 250 is approaching from the east." The heavy cavalry scrambled to their horses, but Kand raised a hand to still them. He looked at Fatties and smiled. "They are here. Go, Fatties, welcome them home." As the knight rode out to meet his kin, Kand clenched his fist, a confident smile playing on his lips. The investment had arrived, and with it, the future of his realm began to look very bright indeed. Fatties returned to Sentry Oasis in a cloud of dust, leading a massive caravan from Suno. Behind him, 200 peasants guided 5 wagons piled high with grain, dried meat, and sausages, provisions meant to sustain a growing settlement. But it was the escort that truly caught Kand's eye. 50 Swadian infantry marched in perfect, rhythmic formation. These were not mere recruits, they were heavy infantry, clad in layers of chainmail and studded leather, their iron-rimmed heater shields gleaming in the desert sun. With hand-and-a-half swords at their hips, they stood as a steel wall, the reliable foundation of any battle. Field Kand nodded in quiet satisfaction. His forces now totaled nearly 200 elite soldiers, including heavy cavalry and Ravenstern Rangers. Though small in number, their true combat power was 10 times greater than the ragtag bands he had once led. Fatties, Kand called out. The young knight approached, his former sorrow replaced by a firm, noble resolve. Kand entrusted him with the command, ordering him to familiarize the new troops with the Oasis and to strike down any gnolls attempting a sneak attack. As the troops marched out, the rhythmic clashing of their armor sounded to Kand like a whisper of war, an intoxicating display of strength. Turning to the peasants, Kand promised them a new life of work and security. They cheered, "Long live, my lord," before setting to work, hauling 200 bags of grain to the newly finished animal-powered mill. However, a shadow remained. Man-eyed the merchant approached with a frown. "My lord, the salt mine. Fatties says the gnolls have occupied it again." Kand's eyes narrowed. The gnolls were a broken race, their tribes burned, yet they clung to the ruins like stubborn shadows. "It is no matter," Kand snorted. "We will clear them out permanently." To ensure total dominance, Kand activated a rare golden card, troop recruitment doubling. He applied its power to the desert bandit camp, instantly doubling its capacity. With a flick of his mind and 300 dinars, 10 new desert bandits emerged, leading their lean desert horses. Kand didn't stop there. He used a military equipment card to replace their crude maces with razor-sharp Saranid scimitars. Now, with a specialized light cavalry force ready to sweep the dunes, the message to the gnolls was clear: there would be no more mercy. The desert belonged to Kand. The Kurjit and the Saranids represent 2 sides of a lethal coin. The Kurjit are masters of the bow, harassing the enemy from horseback until exhaustion sets in. But the Saranids, they prefer the brutal impact of the short javelin, shattering formations in an instant before launching a brazen, heavy charge to crush what remains of a coward's spirit. In the Nalan Desert, Kand has embraced the Saranid way. It is a tactic born of the desert horse, robust, wide-hoofed, and built for the violence of a direct charge rather than the long game of a skirmish. Kand's vision for the future is clear. His Swadian infantry will hold a perfect, unbreakable line, while his Saranid desert bandits swarm the flanks like relentless flies. And when the enemy falters, the flood of Swadian heavy cavalry will bring absolute death. Next is just waiting, Kand calculates silently. Today, the village of Durham will be reborn. It will no longer be a mere settlement, but a fortress. In this world, a hard fist represents justice, and Kand has chosen the path of the bellicose. To him, military strength is the only true precursor to peace. As the noon sun burns overhead, Kand surveys. Wise Sentry Oasis, like the rising sun, he whispers, it is the cornerstone of his empire. The next morning, Kand rises before the dawn. He steps downstairs to find his Swadian infantry standing guard, chests puffed, spirits high. "Lord Kand, everything is safe," they report. The night patrols were a success. 40 desert bandits, led by 5 Saranid riders, have scoured the dunes. No gnolls were found. Kand feels a flicker of regret. Captives could have been sold to the upcoming caravan, but he quickly dismisses it. If they cannot be captured, they will be put to the sword. As the new week begins, the system tallies the cost of war. Taxes bring in a meager 200 dinar, while military wages demand over 4,700. It is the price of power, and Kand pays it without hesitation. He looks toward the horizon and gives the order, assemble the troops, set the defenses. 202 elite soldiers stand ready, Swadian heavy cavalry, Ravenston Rangers, infantry in gleaming chainmail. It is a force that would make any tribe tremble. Cand closes his eyes and communicates with the system, focusing on the golden card in his mind. Upgrade. The card shatters, and a profound, great power descends upon the Oasis. The upgrade request Cand had previously been denied suddenly flickered back to life on his retina. To focus, he closed his eyes and a system prompt chimed, "The village of Durham is ready. Upgrade." Without a moment's hesitation, Cand spoke the word firmly, "Upgrade." Instantly, golden fragments of light transformed into a rushing data stream, enveloping the ruler's hall. Cand felt himself merging with a profound, mysterious power as the very rules of reality shifted. A new choice appeared: fortress, military, or town economy. Fortress, he commanded. In a heartbeat, the transformation was complete. Cand opened his eyes to find the wooden hall replaced by cold, neatly cut blue stone. The ceiling now soared 4 meters high, adorned with the lion banners of the Kingdom of Swadia. The windows were gone, replaced by thick, defensive walls that cast the room into a dim, martial gloom, reminiscent of a barren stronghold. Cand explored his new seat of power. The building had grown into a 3-story stone tower. The second floor housed guard barracks and storage, while the third floor featured luxurious Swadian carpets and velvet-covered beds. Finally, he climbed a wooden staircase to the roof, a 10-meter-high stone platform. Stepping out into the brilliant desert sun, Cand looked down from the crenellated battlements. 2 Ravenston Rangers stood guard, their bows capable of covering the entire oasis from this height. Below in the streets, fatties and the troops looked like tiny black dots. As they spotted Cand, they raised their weapons in a fanatical cheer that echoed against the stone. "This is my fortress," Cand whispered, a surge of heroic confidence rising in his chest. He opened his eye. Interface to see the new status of Durham. While the system's evaluation was now terrible due to the lack of defensive walls and crowded living spaces, the potential was vast. New military buildings, barracks, stables, and weapon workshops were now available. Acting decisively, Cand activated his Stonewall building pack. His consciousness rose to a god's-eye view 20 meters above the oasis. From this height, he planned the future: agriculture to the north, industry to the south, animal husbandry by the western lake, and a dedicated military district to the east. The village was gone. In its place, a jagged stone giant had risen from the sands, ready to defy the desert. Lord Cand had finished his grand design for Sentry Oasis. With a cold, calculated efficiency, he divided the land into 4 distinct sectors: agriculture to the north, livestock to the west, residential and handicrafts to the south, and a strictly guarded military zone to the east. The commercial district he once imagined was discarded. In this world, the law is merely a tool for the nobility, and as a baron, Cand is the law. He decided that no foreign caravan would ever step foot inside his fortress. If they wished to trade for salt, they would do so at the distant post station. Any intruder seeking the secrets of his mines would be met with a warning, and then a swift death. With a flicker of thought, the system's power surged. From a god's-eye view, Cand watched as massive stone walls materialized, surging from the earth to encircle the oasis. The fortress took the shape of a perfect rectangle, strategically separating the spring from the lake. This ensured that even under siege, his troops would have water, while any enemy attempting to drink from the lake would be picked off by crossbowmen from the battlements. A system prompt chimed in his mind: 2 additional city gates can be built. Cand placed them instantly, one in the military sector and one in the residential area, each reinforced with thick wood and iron plating. As the walls settled, Cand opened his eyes, returning to his physical body in the ruler's hall. The room had transformed into a formidable military tower, lit by the flickering orange glow of pine oil torches. Stepping outside, he was met by the fierce, loyal gaze of his Swadian infantry. Fatties, his commander, stood ready. "Cancel the troop assembly," Cand ordered. "Organize the city defense system immediately." As the soldiers moved with elite precision to their new posts, Cand turned his attention to a lingering shadow from the past. "Fatties, man-eyed, follow me. It is time we spoke with our guest in the basement." They descended into the cell to retrieve Asechi, a high knoll from the Grey Mane Kingdom. Though he possessed the head of a wolf and lethal fangs, Asechi displayed a terrifying, human-like intelligence. The Gnoll looked up, his shackled hands trembling. "Awaiting your command, respected human lord," he rasped. Ed in fluent common tongue. Kan leaned in, his eyes filled with a predatory chill. "Let us talk about your hometown," he smiled. "Tell me everything about the Mannheim coast." Kan's voice was calm, his youthful face wearing the faint, deceptive smile of a 16-year-old human noble. But Asechi, an intelligent high Gnoll, felt his heart hammer against his ribs in a rhythm of pure terror. He knew this boy was physically weak, yet his eyes kept darting to the guard nearby. A soldier in heavy iron armor, hand resting on a longsword that could claim a head in a single silver flash. "Yes, respected young noble," Asechi stammered, bowing his head. He had no choice but to speak. He described the Mannheim coast, a fertile paradise far to the north of the Nalan Desert. There, the High Gnolls had built a civilization of their own, the Grey Mane Kingdom, to distinguish themselves from their primitive, blood-drinking cousins in the wastes. For centuries, they had vied for power against the aquatic lizardmen and a growing colony of elves known as the Elf Council. But the stalemate was breaking. The lizardmen were growing rich through sea trade, and the elves were receiving reinforcements from across the ocean. The Grey Mane Kingdom was stagnating. Desperate for new lands, they sent explorers like Asechi into the desert, seeking the human kingdoms whispered about in legends. Asechi had found them. And he had found a precious salt mine. "I can help you," Asechi pleaded, his voice thick with desperation. "I can be your spy, your merchant. The coast has everything you lack." Internally, however, the Gnoll was seething. He imagined the day the Grey Mane legions would trample this outpost, and how he would personally watch this human boy boil in a pot. Kan exchanged looks with his advisors, Fatties and Manide. They nodded in grim agreement. The information was invaluable, a map to a new world. "Very nice," Kan said, his trademark aristocratic smile never wavering. "Of course, my lord," Asechi beamed, thinking he had won his freedom. Then Kan leaned back and spoke with chilling casualness. "Take him out and dispose of him." Asechi's face went slack. "Wait, my lord, what is wrong?" He never got an answer. A heavy iron shield slammed into his jaw with a sickening crunch, silencing him instantly. The guards dragged the dazed Gnoll into the hall. A moment later, the muffled ring of a sword strike echoed through the wooden door. The guard returned, linen robes stained crimson. "It is done." Kan didn't flinch. He looked at his men, his gaze hardening. "The Lion Duchy is an iron plate we cannot yet crack, but the Mannheim coast is open. We move before the Gnolls can strike back. We take the north." The execution of the High Gnoll, Asechi, was a cold necessity. Kan knew that peace between races was a myth, and a Gnoll with human-like intellect was far too dangerous to leave alive. Once Asechi's knowledge of the Mannheim Sea Oasis was extracted, his value expired. Kan's mind turned to the horizon. Beyond the Nalan Desert lay a world of profit, a mirror to the ancient Middle Eastern trade routes. With his salt mine producing high-quality white gold, Kan saw himself not as a conqueror but as a distant, trustworthy merchant prince. In the game of politics, it was always best to befriend the distant state while crushing the neighbor at your door. Inside the ruler's hall, the atmosphere was heavy. Kan, Manide, and Fatties were deep in strategy when the thundering of hooves interrupted them. A Saranid rider burst in with news. "My lord, the patrol has returned." The report was staggering. The light cavalry had slaughtered over 300 Gnolls and captured 120 more. Kan's eyes widened. At 30 dinars a head, these captives represented a windfall of 3,600 dinars. The captive trade is indeed profitable, Kan mused, though a flicker of regret crossed his face. "I wonder." Manide offered a dry smile. "When the main expeditionary force arrives, we shall find out." The trio walked out to the training grounds to inspect the hall. There, over 100 Gnolls sat bound and broken, surrounded by arrogant desert bandits who circled them on horseback like vultures. To Kan, the sight was surreal. "Why do I feel like a villain in a play?" he asked. "They aren't victims, my lord," Manide countered. "They are walking currency." Kan gave the orders. Manide would handle the logistics of the sale while Fatties secured the Oasis. As Kan walked the perimeter of his fortress, the 5-meter-high walls of Durham, he felt the weight of his ambition. The Oasis was growing, but it was hungry for manpower. The reed harvests and livestock required more hands than his 200 peasants could provide. Suddenly, a movement on the dunes caught his eye. Emerging from the shimmering heat was a familiar sight, the caravan from Rivasheg, its guards and carriages kicking up dust. The timing was perfect. The walking currency in the training yard was about to be cashed in. The Rivasheg caravan, separated for 3 weeks, finally returned on the first day of the month. Sturdy draft horses snorted, pulling heavily loaded wagons across the sandy ground, leaving deep ruts that signaled a full stock of supplies. At the gate, a squad of Swadian light infantry stood guard. Though familiar with the travelers, the soldiers remained vigilant, a habitual caution toward the Vigirs, whose kingdom remained a hostile rival to Swadia. As the caravan leader led his wagons toward the ruler's hall, he gasped in surprise. Sentry Oasis had undergone a complete transformation. What was once a crude village was now a formidable fortress. Solid stone walls and secure gates were manned by disciplined sentries. To the east, he spotted Fatties overseeing nearly 100 elite Swadian heavy cavalry and infantry. Their fierce, battle-hardened presence made caravan guards shrink back in instinctive fear. The tension spiked as the caravan noticed 40 desert bandits guarding prisoners nearby. These ruthless marauders, infamous throughout the Serenid Desert, grinned hideously, their hands resting on their scimitars. The 12 caravan sentries gripped their spears, terrified. "Buck up," the leader hissed, reprimanding his men. "This is Lord Khan's territory, and those are Lord Khan's men." The leader hurried forward to the ruler's hall, bowing low as Khan emerged. "Respected Lord Khan, it is an honor to see you again." Khan greeted him with a warm smile. "I am equally happy to see you. What have you brought?" "Grain, tools, oil, and linen," the leader replied. "No luxury goods, only the essentials you require." "Exactly what I need most," Khan nodded. He then ordered a guard to fetch Manhwa, the legendary Nord merchant. The caravan leader was stunned. Manhwa was a hero among traders, famous for profiting from both sides of the Vigir-Khergit war. Inside the hall, Khan sat in thought. Grain was his greatest concern. With the population booming and the threat of the Grey Mane Kingdom's Knoll expedition looming, he needed to stockpile. He planned to use the classic tactic, strengthen the walls and clear the fields, forcing the exhausted enemy to starve at his doorstep. Soon, Manhwa and the caravan leader joined him. Over a breakfast of toasted bread, roasted meat, and cabbage soup, the 3 men talked. While the merchants shared tales of the continent, Khan listened quietly, smiling as he prepared his fortress for the coming storm. Breakfast concluded in a rare moment of harmony. Khan, Manhwa, and the caravan leader sat amidst the quiet efficiency of servants clearing the long table. As the last of the tableware vanished, the atmosphere shifted. It was time for business. Khan leaned back, casually wiping his mouth with a handkerchief. "Was the breakfast to your liking?" "It was delicious," the caravan leader replied quickly, "especially the fresh antelope meat." Khan smiled, though a hint of helplessness touched his voice. "One of the few benefits of the desert, it is easy to dry the meat in the dark before it can rot." Manhwa seized the opening. "Then, do you accept this meat for trade?" The caravan leader hesitated. "Lord Khan, we do not accept just anything." It was a polite refusal, a rule of the system. Khan didn't take offense. Instead, he pressed further. "Then what can you acquire? I wish to establish a long-term cooperation." "Knolls," the leader answered directly. "They are very popular in the kingdom of Vigirs." Manhwa nodded knowingly. "The slave trade." The leader explained that the Vigir iron mines, rich, frozen, and deadly, require strong, enduring labor. The mine owners will pay handsomely for Knoll slaves. Khan's eyes brightened. He cared little for the fate of the Knolls, he cared only for the dinars. "I have 120 prisoners now," Khan said, "and I plan a sweep to capture more. I hope you brought enough coin." "I have," the leader assured him. He then produced a letter. "This is from King Yaraglek of the Vigirs. He sends his sincere respect." As Khan opened the letter, a system notification flashed in his vision. Special mission, the task from the kingdom of Vigirs. The king requested 500 Knoll slaves. The reward, 5 points of honor, 5 precious random draws in the system shop. "Tell the king I am happy to solve his labor shortage," Khan said with a firm nod. Before the meeting ended, Manhwa presented a plate of fine white salt, but the leader shook his head. "We cannot take what is not produced in your territory, Durham. This is the land of miracles." Khan understood. If the system didn't produce it, the merchants wouldn't buy it. However, the leader added, we do acquire gold and curios. Cand paused, his fingers tapping the table. Gold was rare, but curios, items of extraordinary power, were even rarer. He happened to possess a few. He signaled a servant. Go to my room, bring down the box from my cabinet. The wooden box was placed on the table. Cand looked at it, his mind already calculating the riches to come. Cand looked down at the plain wooden box, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Manhwa watched with quiet curiosity as the lid creaked open, revealing 2 pages of ancient parchment resting on exquisite velvet. These were the page of fertile soil and the page of clear spring, relics of a Knoll shaman, pulsing with a faint, soul-stirring aura. Appraise these, Cand commanded, pushing the box toward the caravan leader. How many dinars are they worth? The merchant's face turned deathly solemn as he lifted the box. My lord, he began, his voice hushed with reverence, I would value these at 20,000 dinars, but in a city like Rivasheg, with nobles bidding, they could easily fetch 30,000. 30,000 dinars, the sum was staggering. In the world of Calradia, that gold could build 3 massive velvet factories. It was more wealth than Cand had seen in his 16 years in this world. Yet, as Cand reached for the gold, the caravan leader hesitated. My lord, I advise against selling. Cand frowned, his eyes narrowing. As he touched the parchment, the system interface flickered into his vision. The truth was revealed. These were damaged artifacts capable of summoning earth and water elemental giants every 7 days. There was a catch, however, because the pages were torn, the summoned creatures would be uncontrolled and highly hostile. A wry smile touched Cand's lips. He wasn't a man to shy away from a challenge. Manhwa, he barked, notify fatties, assemble 30 Swadian infantry and 20 Ravenston Rangers at the east gate, we prepare for battle. The sentry Oasis hummed into motion. Fatties, ever the cautious commander, went further, lining up heavy cavalry and patrols until a small army stood Standing atop the 6-meter-high stone gate, Cand looked out over the desert. Position the Rangers on the walls, he ordered. Keep the infantry at the inner gate and hide the cavalry behind the dunes. But my lord, Fatties protested, that leaves the wall exposed, it's too dangerous. Cand's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. They are merely low-level elementals, Fatties. If we cannot hold a wall against them, we have no business ruling this desert. With a final nod, the soldiers braced themselves. Shields were raised, bows were strung, and Cand held the ancient pages tight, waiting to see what monsters he was about to unleash. 20 Ravenston Rangers stepped onto the city wall, their white heavy bows drawn into lethal crescents. Behind the gate, 30 Swadian infantry and 41 light infantry stood poised to charge, while 46 Swadian heavy cavalry, the land tanks of this world, waited in the shadows to crush any resistance like a flood. Cand surveyed his elite force. Suddenly, a system notification flickered across his vision. 2 temporary quests, eliminate all earth and water elemental giants. The reward, life for the desert, grouse nests, beehives, and the miraculous rejuvenation of the date palms. Then let's start with you, Cand whispered. He gripped the page of fertile soil. As he spoke the command, summon earth elemental giant, the air hummed with a profound, trembling power. 30 meters beyond the wall, the sand began to ripple like water. Within seconds, 7 massive figures rose, 2.5 meters tall, composed entirely of thick, wet mud. Where their heads should be, dim yellow lights flickered like eyes. With a muffled roar, the giants trudged forward, their heavy footsteps sinking deep into the dunes. Fire, Fatties bellowed. The Ravenston Rangers, masters of the Misty Mountains, released their breath. Swish, 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 bodkin arrows tore through the air, striking with surgical precision. The shafts buried themselves deep into the glowing yellow eyes of the mud creatures. The giants froze, the yellow light dissipated, and almost instantly the massive forms collapsed into harmless piles of dirt. Is it over? Manhwa asked, his voice trembling. Yes, Cand replied grimly, their eyes are their hearts now, for the water. He raised the page of clear spring, summon water elemental giants. Again the space trembled. The sand beneath them darkened instantly as clear, blue-tinted water erupted from the earth. 2 towering figures took shape, headless, legless, and fueled by a deep, magical hatred. Their deep blue eyes glowed with a fierce intensity as they surged toward the wall. But they never reached it. The Rangers didn't wait for an order. Another volley of arrows shrieked through the air. Splash, the water elementals shattered, their forms dissolving into the sand as if a bucket had been overturned. All that remained were shimmering blue fragments, sparkling like jewels under the desert sun. The bodkin arrows buried themselves deep into the eye sockets of the water elemental giants, a sensation like piercing soft jelly. Instantly, the azure bodies trembled, ripples spreading through their forms until they burst with a heavy splash. The dry desert sand drank the water, turning a dark, sodden yellow. Cand curled his lips, a small chuckle escaping him. This seems quite easy. Having mastered the weak points of these creatures, the Ravenston Rangers, top-tier archery masters, did not miss a single shot. With the rhythmic vibration of bowstrings, they systematically dismantled the giants, turning them back into raw elements. For these Tier 5 warriors, it was effortless. Fatties frowned, observing the remains. Their strength is perhaps comparable to a Swadian sergeant, he noted, but their defense is non-existent. To a master archer, they are no different from unarmored civilians. The caravan leader from the kingdom of Vigirs watched the rangers with awe. Clad in chainmail and linen, carrying both heavy composite bows and two-handed greatswords, they were versatile killing machines. Cand explained simply, they are from the Misty Mountains. They must be masters of both range and blade to survive the forests. As the battle ended, the system chimed in Cand's mind, announcing the completion of his tasks. Rewards, including sand grouse nests, desert bees, and a rejuvenation effect for the date palms, floated as cards in his consciousness. But the scene wasn't over. A group of desert bandits, returning to the gates, suddenly halted. One pointed toward the wet sand. There is something there. Shimmering under the sun were small, pale blue fragments. A bandit dismounted and retrieved them, presenting the crystalline objects to Cand. Gems, my lord, dropped by the giants. Cand examined the pale blue stones, noticing thin cracks where the arrows had struck. He ordered the bandits to search the remains of the earth elemental giants as well. Soon, 7 pale yellow gems resembling fine topaz were recovered, each bearing similar flaws. Fatties realized the truth. The gems, they were their hearts, their weak points. Cand turned to the caravan leader, holding up the damaged treasures. Tell me, would the nobles of Rivasheg welcome such stones? The merchant looked down, his expression pained. My lord, I am sorry, these cracked gems, they are worthless to the nobility. In the harsh lands of Calradia, gemstones are a fickle currency. While beautiful, they lack the raw utility of gold and silver, the yellow and white darlings that nobles pursue with a fanaticism born of constant warfare. To a lord, a diamond is merely a trinket for a lady. To a soldier, it cannot buy a blade. The caravan leader from Rivasheg stood awkwardly before Lord Cand, his head bowed in apology. He could not purchase the inferior, cracked gems Cand offered. In the brutal world of the continent, such a refuse. Al might have led a lesser lord to slaughter the merchant and blame it on bandits, but Cand only chuckled. Dismissing the apology with a wave of his hand, he understood the rules of the system. He handed the 7 pale yellow and 2 pale blue stones to Manhwa, his trusted merchant, who tucked them away with a knowing nod. The battle with the elemental giants was over, leaving Cand with a lingering sense of disappointment. The legends had promised titans, yet the Ravenston Rangers had dispatched them with 2 clinical rounds of headshots. It was a stark lesson. In this world, extraordinary power bowed to organized steel. If magic were truly supreme, mages, not nobles, would wear the crowns. Dismiss everyone, Cand instructed Fatties. Perhaps this caution was unnecessary. Fatties remained solemn. Protecting your safety is never unnecessary, my lord. Cand smiled at the flattery and turned to the business of governance. He delegated the supply runs to Manhwa and ordered the Swadian light infantry and desert bandits to remain behind. As the crowds dispersed, Cand looked upon his men. He was no master of medieval management, but he knew one modern truth: put talent where it fits best. Now it was time for the reward. Open the upgrade interface, Cand whispered. The system flickered to life before his eyes. The experience gain was uneven, a quirk of the battlefield. Only 4 Swadian light infantry were ready to ascend to the rank of heavy cavalry, but the desert bandits, they had feasted on the slaughter of 500 gnolls. Their experience overflowed. Cand did not hesitate. Upgrade them all. A surge of data, a shimmering blur of light enveloped the men. In seconds, the light infantry transformed into ironclad Swadian heavy cavalry, their horses draped in mail. Beside them, the desert bandits shifted. their leather armor hardening into iron-studded plates, their eyes gleaming with a more brutal, desperate hunger. 15 of them surged even further, evolving into Saranid riders, elite, chainmail-clad lancers with turbans wrapped around iron helmets. Khan surveyed his new force. The sentry oasis was no longer just a refuge, it was becoming a fortress of iron and bone. Strength, after all, was the only fundamental truth. The troop upgrades were finally complete, and a new energy surged through the ranks. 20 Saranid riders and 25 elite desert bandits now stood ready, forming the bedrock of a new light cavalry unit. Within weeks, this force would handle the grueling work of reconnaissance and harassment, sparing the elite Swadian heavy cavalry from meaningless deployments. Dismissed, Khan commanded, his voice steady. Continue guarding the captives, don't let our dinar run away. He gestured toward the dejected gnolls huddled in the training ground, precious resources to be exchanged for the currency that fueled the oasis's growth. The Saranids dispersed with lethal efficiency, forming a living cage around prisoners. With the military settled, Khan turned his attention toward the east, toward the lifeblood of the settlement, agriculture. He walked past the towering city walls to inspect the 12 acres of barley and date palms. Here, peasants toiled under a punishing sun, desperately patching irrigation canals that collapsed constantly in the soft, shifting sands. Build canals, Khan whispered, connecting his mind to the system. For the small price of 100 dinar, the primitive trenches would be replaced by stone-paved channels. Within moments, a construction team from Suno arrived to begin the work. As the workers laid stone and timber, Khan ordered his peasants to fetch the fertile soil left behind by the fallen earth elemental giants. This rich, magical earth was spread over the barren fields, a strategic move to transform the desert floor into a lush garden. Khan then moved into the cool, dappled shade of the date palm forest. 10 dromedary camels chewed lazily on reeds, sheltered from the 70-degree heat of the open dunes. The temperature here was perfect, a natural sanctuary. Reaching into his mind, Khan prepared to finalize the day's progress. He had earned rewards from his recent missions, creatures perfectly adapted to this harsh environment. With a focused thought, he activated his items, releasing 5 nests of sand grouse and 10 hives of desert bees into the shade. As the hum of wings filled the air, the foundation of animal husbandry was officially laid. Sentry Oasis was no longer just a fortress, it was becoming a home. In Khan's mind, 2 cards dissolve into golden fragments of light. A stream of data shoots from his eyes, materializing instantly into 5 chicken coops of straw and timber. They stand half a person tall against the city wall, right beside the stone-paved water channel. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The sound is incessant. Brown feathered heads with black pearl eyes poke out from the small doors, peering inquisitively at the busy construction workers. Suddenly, a cry goes up from the date palm grove. Bees, there are so many, everyone be careful. Peasants drop their tools and flee, covering their heads. Above them, 10 wooden boxes, the artificial beehives of the Swadian beekeepers, now sit in the shade. Thousands of desert bees swarm out like dark clouds, their collective buzzing filling the air as they explore the oasis. At the edge of the grove, several small birds dive in, snapping up bees in their beaks. Sturdy male sand grouse pin the birds down, silencing them with sharp pecks. Behind them, 45 female sand grouse emerge, flapping their wings without fear, pecking contentedly at the sand. Khan watches the 5 roosters and shakes his head with a self-deprecating smile. My life, he grumbles, is not even as good as a chicken's. He knows Sentry Oasis is still too young for the burden of native women whom he does not trust, but the system provides what is needed. The peasants soon realize the bees are not attacking. Relief washes over them, they can return to work. Someone bring some grain, Khan instructs. A peasant brings a bag of plump, high-quality wheat. As the grain is scattered, the 50 sand grouse scramble to eat, behaving as if they had been domesticated for years. There is still 1 card, Khan whispers. He looks at the lush date palms. His mind connects to the final card, and a golden burst of data sweeps across the 5-acre grove like a gust of wind. Instantly, dense white flowers sway under the green leaves. The air fills with a sweet fragrance. The desert bees dive into the blossoms, their bodies covered in pollen as they begin the work of making honey. Khan smiles, there will be honey to eat in the future. Suddenly, a system notification pings in his vision. A temporary quest, the beginning of the sugar workshop. The reward, 50 peasant women. Can's spirit bolsters, finally, a touch of feminine grace for the all-male territory. These women will be perfect for the kitchen, the beehives, and the sugar workshop. With a chuckle, Can accepts. The production of honey date sugar is about to begin. Date and honey sugar is an exceptionally simple craft for the Serenid, who are masters of the desert's golden harvest. For Can, the system's latest task was less a challenge and more a formality. He returned to the fortress and stepped into the sugar workshop. Dust coated the tools from long disuse, yet the space remained orderly. As he inspected the equipment, two sturdy Serenid riders strode in. They bowed respectfully, their armor clinking in the quiet room. "Lord Can, you called for us." Can nodded. "Do you know how to make sugar?" The two elite Tier 4 cavalrymen exchanged a look of pure astonishment. They were men of the scimitar, not the kitchen. After a hesitant pause, one replied, "We know the process, my lord. We have seen the craftsmen boil it before." Their voices lacked confidence, but Can remained calm. "Knowing the process is enough," he said. "We will experiment." Soon the furnace was roaring, the charcoal glowing a fiery red. A rider arrived with a small clay pot, the sweet amber scent of desert honey wafting through the air. Nearby, an iron pot bubbled with ground dates, the liquid thickening into a rich, reddish-brown syrup. "Add the honey," Can commanded. He poured the golden liquid into the pot, the two scents merging into an intense fragrance. They added a sprinkle of flour, and the mixture became incredibly thick. The riders stirred with wooden sticks, their eyes lighting up with joy as the syrup turned sticky and dark. "It is done," Can noted with satisfaction. The riders poured the syrup into containers to cool, then used their scimitars to cut the hardened mass into finger-sized cubes. Can took a piece. As he bit down, the rich sweetness of dates and honey exploded across his palate. Suddenly, a dialogue box flashed across his vision. "Ding, you have mastered the technique of sugar making. Temporary task, the beginning of the sugar workshop completed. Reward, 50 peasant women." Can smiled. Sugar was power, a luxury that could rival the value of salt in the Lion Duchy. He instructed the riders to clean the workshop, then headed toward the ruler's hall. As he walked, he spotted the new arrivals, 50 peasant women from the continent of Calradia. Inside the hall, he met with his advisor, Manhwa, who reported the successful sale of Knoll slaves for 3,600 dinars. "Settle these women," Can instructed Manhwa, his tone turning playful yet firm, "but keep them separate from the peasant men. I need workers, not a nursery of pregnant women during this time of heavy labor." Manhwa nodded solemnly. The sentry Oasis was growing, and with sugar and salt as his weapons, Can was ready to open the trade routes and secure his place in the world. Can was a man of his word, and his word was law in the Nalan Desert. To him, the salt mine was more than a strategic objective, it was a necessity. He would allow only one power to thrive in this barren wasteland, himself. As for the Knolls, their lives meant nothing to him. After a brief rest, the order to assemble echoed through the air. Outside the eastern city wall, 20 Serenid riders and 25 elite desert bandits waited on horseback. They whispered and smirked, their arrogant confidence born from a lifetime of licking blood off the edge of a knife. Can knew their nature, they were fearless, but under his command they would be cautious. This expedition wasn't just about slaughter, it was about survival. They needed to secure the mine and bring back crude salt for Jianxi Pass. Time was a luxury they didn't have. "Are you ready?" Can asked, his voice softening as he surveyed his 55 cavalrymen. Fatty stepped forward, his tone firm. "Everything is ready. The dromedary camels and supplies are prepared. We can mine the salt the moment we arrive." 10 camels stood nearby, laden with burlap sacks and water skins, tended by 10 peasants. A Swadian infantryman led Can's warhorse forward. Can mounted nimbly, pulling up his hood. "Prepare to set off." As the formation began to move, Fatties hurried alongside. "My lord, are you sure you don't need more men?" "No," Can replied, his expression solemn. "Your task is to guard the fortress." Seeing the worry on Fatties' face, Can patted a long, linen-wrapped object at his side, the deterring presence. This artifact, a flag of a golden lion on a red background, was his secret weapon. It would shatter the morale of any enemy before the first blow was even struck. With a nod, Can shook the reins and galloped away. The journey was swift. They followed old tracks through the sand, ignoring small groups of gnolls that fled in terror at their approach. Only larger groups were hunted down and eliminated. By dawn of the second day, they reached the dunes overlooking the tribal ruins. Can spurred his horse to the crest. Below, the desert was scarred black by fire, but new tents had risen from the ashes. His eyes narrowed. Among the tattered shelters of the survivors were a dozen brand new linen tents, separated by a clear, fearful gap. Emerging from the new tents were gnolls unlike the scavengers they had fought before. These were clad in chainmail, wielding massive two-handed battle axes, their fur clean and well-kept. "Hi gnolls," Can whispered, his voice cold. "Have they come again?" Neatly groomed fur, strong, burly bodies, and eyes filled with the pride of a civilized race. These were the high gnolls of the Grey Mane Kingdom, beings who understood etiquette and shame, but as Can looked down from the dunes, he saw only the cold truth of an invading force. A dozen brand new tents stood in the southern Nalan Desert. Even without their merchant guide, the gnolls had found their way, establishing an outpost that signaled a looming crisis for the Sentry Oasis. "My lord," a Saranid rider whispered, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment, "do we need to prepare for battle?" "Yes," Can replied, his eyes darkening with a gloomy resolve. "Immediately." Behind him, the light cavalry adjusted their armor and gripped their scimitars. This was more than a skirmish, it was a fight for survival. If the Sentry Oasis fell, Can would lose his fief, his title, and eventually his life. He could already see the noble factions of the Lion Duchy placing a noose around his neck. "That will never happen," he hissed. Can drew a velvet flag from its case, the golden lion on a red background fluttering defiantly in the wind. He turned to his men, his voice dropping to a deep, commanding growl. "Come, my cavalry, let us show these friends who the true master of the desert is." He activated his deterring presence and roared, "All units, charge." The desert erupted. 20 armored Saranid riders and 25 elite desert bandits formed a lethal wedge, an arrowhead of steel thundering down the dunes. Rumbles, rumbles, rumble. The sound was like rolling thunder in a rainless sky. Inside the camp, the high gnolls stepped from their tents, confused. They looked for storm clouds but found only a vibration beneath their feet that grew into a violent, shaking force. "Ow!" The panicked howls of the lesser gnolls finally snapped the high gnolls into reality. They saw them then, human cavalry, a rare and terrifying sight, rushing toward them like a bursting flood. The high gnolls gripped their two-handed battle axes, trying to summon their famous ferocity, but as the horses closed the gap, their confidence shattered. Their mouths went dry. The 3-meter spears leveled at their chests were the last things many would ever see. Crack! The spears pierced chainmail as if it were paper, skewering the gnoll warriors and lifting them off their feet. The wooden shafts snapped under the sheer force of the inertia. The riders didn't hesitate, they discarded the broken wood, drew their curved scimitars, and wheeled their horses around. But a second charge wasn't necessary. The high gnoll vanguard lay broken in the red-stained sand. The lead warrior struggled to breathe, looking up at the indifferent, cold eyes of the humans above him. "Impossible," he wheezed, blood bubbling in his throat. As his vision faded into the desert heat, one final, terrifying thought flickered in his mind. The great expeditionary force of the Grey Mane Kingdom was marching toward its doom. Whoa! Can tightened the reins, and the warhorse beneath him finally slowed from its charging gallop. Beside him, the Saranid riders and desert bandits reined in their mounts, their faces stern, their right hands still trembling. They had just crushed the enemy in a single, devastating pass. These fierce desert warriors found it hard to believe that the heavy infantry gnolls had dared to stand against a Kusht lance charge at its peak. The impact had been so violent that the shockwaves through their arms would take days to heal. "It's over," Can said, his voice heavy with fatigue. The 30-plus gnolls who resisted were dead. The remaining 300 lesser gnolls had scattered into the vast sea of sand, broken and traumatized. No one was left to organize a counterattack. "Lord Can, do we hunt them down?" a rider asked, his eyes gleaming with a raw killing intent. "No need," Can replied, exhaling slowly. "Bring the camel caravan forward, we set up camp here." Soon, 10 peasants emerged from behind the dunes, leading dromedary camels laden with supplies. While the soldiers rested and prepared a breakfast of sliced bread, dried meat, and date honey candy, Can turned his attention to the nearby well. The high knolls had recently repaired it. To them, it was a lifeline, but to Can, it was a strategic threat. Lord, a Saranid writer warned, this well will become an asset for the enemy. Can nodded. The Grey Mane Kingdom's expeditionary force was approaching. After 30 days of trekking through the waterless Devil's Zone, they would be desperate for this well. If Can destroyed it now, the enemy would be forced to march toward the Sentry Oasis with exhausted, dehydrated bodies. We must destroy it, Can commanded. From morning until late afternoon, the men worked tirelessly, pouring bags of sand into the depths and tearing down the stone walls. By dusk, the well was gone, leveled with the desert floor, its location a secret known only to Can. Let's go, he ordered. Under the rising stars, the caravan pushed toward the natural salt mine. They arrived the next morning to find a white expanse of saline alkali land stretching to the horizon. There were no knolls in sight, though the corpses from the previous battle had been scavenged. Peasants, collect the salt, hurry, Can. He urged. Time was running out. He needed every resource possible to prepare for the coming storm. For when the Grey Mane Kingdom finally arrived, the desert would run red once more. The threat of the Grey Mane Kingdom hung over Can's head like the sword of Damocles, a constant, looming shadow where a single misstep meant eternal destruction. Time was his greatest enemy. He lacked the initiative, forced to wait for a blow from an arrogant foe that viewed his fortress, Durham, as nothing more than a weak village. But in that contempt, Can saw a flaw to exploit. He needed to return to the Sentry Oasis immediately to convert his spoils into strength. His 5 Saranid riders were on the verge of a transformation. Soon, they would become Mamluks, the kings of the desert. These 5th-tier heavy cavalry were the ultimate elite, capable of shattering enemy lines with irresistible force. Alongside his Swadian cavalry and desert bandits, this small but sharp blade could slice through an army of thousands. As Can planned his defense, a rider approached. My lord, everything has been collected. Nearby, peasants finished loading 10 dromedary camels with bulging sacks of coarse salt. These ships of the desert would carry the wealth needed to fund his war. Can nodded, his voice firm. Notify the scouts, we are preparing to return. As the troops regrouped, an unexpected sight emerged from the dunes. Nearly 300 lesser gnolls, once ferocious and savage, were walking in dejected lines, their weapons gone. They had surrendered. Can shook his head in disbelief. How did you bring back so many, and why did they surrender so obediently? The bandits shrugged. They simply gave up, my lord. Can looked at the filthy, broken creatures. In the brutal logic of the desert, there was no room for soft-heartedness. Kindness to an enemy is cruelty to oneself. Since they have chosen to surrender, Can said coldly, bring them all. The mine owners in the kingdom of Vigirs are always short of labor, and they pay well in silver dinars. The return journey was slow. The bandits were not gentle, using scabbards to strike any gnoll that faltered. Can watched the prisoners with a hardened heart. He knew that if he did not remain the victor, he would be the one in chains. After 2 days and nights of trekking through the unforgiving Nalan Desert, the expedition finally reached the Sentry Oasis, laden with salt, burdened by prisoners, and ready to prepare for the storm to come. High atop the fortress, the Riston Rangers had long since spotted the returning party. Before Can could even reach the city gate, Fatties arrived with 50 Swadian heavy cavalry to welcome him. Clad in iron from head to horse, their hooves shook the sand, leaving shallow, terrifying pits with every step. Lord Can, welcome back, Fatties greeted, bowing with his usual disciplined grace. Can nodded, his body aching from 2 days and nights in the desert. He looked toward the setting sun and gestured to his weary men. Prepare food and water quickly, and do not forget fresh fodder for the horses. Everything is ready, my lord, Fatties replied. He glanced at the line of captives, 300 lesser gnolls, so thin they were practically skin and bone. I was unaware there were so many prisoners. Their rations must be prepared back at the fortress. Can waved the concern away. They have excellent endurance, they won't die just yet. As they entered the Sentry Oasis, the atmosphere shifted. Manite and the garrison stood at the gate, while peasants dropped their tools to cheer for their lord's triumph. For a moment vanity swelled in Can's chest, an intoxicating, dangerous feeling, but as he looked around, he sobered quickly. Durham was still primitive. The walls were too low, there were no watchtowers, no barracks, and the soldiers were still sleeping in tents. After handing his exhausted warhorse to a soldier, Kand retreated to the ruler's hall. There, Swadian peasant women served a feast that surprised him. Alongside the usual stewed lamb and cabbage soup was toasted bread drizzled with date sugar and honey, followed by pan-fried desert antelope tenderloin. The sweetness was a welcome relief from the salty, dried rations of the trail. Kand ate heartily, watching the sturdy peasant women work with efficient, powerful movements. They were far more capable than the delicate girls of the city. Once finished, Kand stepped outside. The rich scent of fried fat filled the air as his soldiers feasted in the streets. Manhwa and the caravan leader approached him, bowing low. The food was excellent, Kand praised. It was rendered from the fat of the antelopes, my lord, Manhwa explained, to save the cost of imported oil. Kand smiled, his mind already turning back to business. He looked at the caravan leader and gestured toward the prisoners. I have over 300 Knoll captives here, and I cannot wait to see those lovely dinar back in my hands. For Lord Kand, the desert was no longer just a wasteland, it was a gold mine. Knoll captives, valued at 30 dinars each, were his fastest ticket to wealth. These creatures were the hottest commodity in the kingdom of Vigirs, where snowfield mine owners prized them for their strength. One knoll could do the work of 5 human miners. Inside the ruler's hall, the caravan leader, a man Kand usually addressed simply by his profession, offered a respectful bow. It is my honor to solve your troubles, he smiled. Beside him stood a capable young man of 17, the son of a fallen comrade. The caravan leader, whose name Kand only just realized was Jocelyn, gave the lad a momentous task. Count the captives, feed them, and once we have 500. The youth's face lit up with joy as he hurried out. Manhwa, Kand's trusted commercial advisor, watched him go with a smile. He seems a bit young, Manhwa noted. Kand, though only 16H. Himself felt like a middle-aged man after living 2 lives. He nodded solemnly. It is good for the young to practice. The young guard soon returned with the tally, 322 knolls. The value, 9,660 dinars. Kand's eyebrows shot up. He thought of the thousands of knolls he had slaughtered in the past and felt a pang of regret. He had been leaving a fortune to rot in the sun. With his savings now surging toward 16,000 dinars, Kand turned his focus to a special mission for King Yaraglek. He was 58 captives short of the goal. Summon Fatties, Kand commanded the guards. Have him lead the Swadian heavy cavalry to sweep the dunes. I want those knolls by dinner. As Jocelyn and his nephew departed to manage the growing camp, Kand issued final orders to Manhwa. The salt pans needed to be fired and the impurities filtered with charcoal to ensure a product fit for nobles, not just serfs. And the post station, Kand added, his tone sharpening, garrison it. If the traders from Jiangxi Pass want to talk, they stop there. Anything deeper into the Oasis is my private land. Kand watched Manhwa with a sense of grim approval. The future of the Century Oasis rested entirely on a single transaction, the sale of refined white salt to Baron Dillon of Jiangxi Pass. This pass was the only shield protecting Kand from the Lion Duchy, but he knew shields could easily become swords. Baron Dillon had risen from a common cavalryman to a lord through sheer cunning. He was a tiger and Kand was negotiating for its skin. Yet, Kand felt a cold confidence. As long as the Baron absorbed the initial malice of the world, Kand would have the time he needed to grow. In the sugar workshop near the city wall, the air grew thick. Manhwa, granted full authority, oversaw a team of peasants as they began the arduous process of salt boiling. 40 sacks of crude salt, bitter, toxic, and gray, sat piled like a fortress wall. Soon, the furnaces roared. Thick black smoke billowed into the cloudless desert sky, acting as a beacon for any enemy within a day's journey. Kand knew the risk. The smoke practically shouted the location of his wealth to every bandit and knoll in the wastes, but the profit was worth the peril. Inside the workshop, the transformation was hypnotic. Crude salt dissolved into bubbling brine, releasing a foul, gray scum that the women meticulously skimmed away. The liquid was filtered through charcoal, stripping away the bitterness until only pure, high-salinity water remained. Kand refused to sell cheap salt to the masses. Such a move would subvert the social hierarchy and invite the wrath of the nobility. Instead, he sought the exorbitant prices of the elite. As the water evaporated, snow-white crystals began to precipitate, beautiful, pure, and rare. Though half the volume was lost in the process, the value of the remaining salt increased several hundredfold. As the sun dipped low, the sound of hooves signaled a different kind of success. Fatties returned, leading 50 Swadian heavy cavalry and a line of over 100 blood-stained, trembling Knoll captives. Can summoned the caravan leader Jocelyn to the ruler's hall immediately. The Count Can asked, his voice tight with anticipation. Jocelyn bowed. 103 new captives, my lord. That brings the total to 572. A slow smile spread across Can's face. The quota was met, the special task was complete, and the rewards of honor were finally within his grasp. Fatty's skill was undeniable. Another 103 Knoll prisoners were secured, bringing in 3,090 dinars. The crisp clink of metal coins was music to Can's ears. Looking up at the caravan leader Jocelyn, Can asked with a smile, then, my mission is complete. Jocelyn stood and bowed with the solemn etiquette of the Vigirs. Excellently so. On behalf of King Yarriglek, I express our deepest gratitude. These 545 prisoners are just the beginning of our cooperation. Cand raised an eyebrow. Will the kingdom of Vigirs continue to purchase them? Of course, Jocelyn nodded. The snowfield mines can never have too many. Can chuckled. To him this was turning waste into gold. Originally he killed gnolls to survive, now capturing them was a risk-free business. Suddenly, a system prompt flashed across his vision. Special mission complete, reward 5 honor points. The description noted that the mine owners were grateful for the labor, but the prompts didn't stop there. You have gained the friendship of the kingdom of Vigirs. Bonus reward 1,000 prestige. Can swallowed hard, stunned by the vague but powerful reward. Before he could process it, Jocelyn requested leave to assist his nephew with the returning carriages. Can agreed, watching the man depart. He is a good guy, Can remarked. A comrade worthy of entrusting one's back to, Fatties agreed, before excusing himself to patrol the city walls as night approached. Left alone, Can skipped dinner and retreated to his room. He lay on his velvet bed and closed his eyes. System, enter the mall lucky draw. A colorful treasure chest appeared in his mind. Can didn't hesitate, he opted for a 5-draw. The chest burst open and rewards flooded his retina. First, 50 Vigir archers, tier 4 ranged units. Second, 50 Swadian crossbowmen. Third, 4 arrow towers. Fourth, a heightened city wall attic. And finally, 3 ammunition replenishment spells. Can's heart raced. This was a massive harvest. With the Grey Mane Kingdom's expeditionary force approaching, these rewards focused entirely on defensive firepower. The 100 new marksmen, combined with the replenishment spells, meant he could rain death upon any siege. This lucky draw was the right choice, Cand whispered. He realized he still needed to purchase more arrows from Baron Dillon at Giantshi Pass to ensure his new army never ran dry. The desert was about to become a graveyard for his enemies. Dusk fades into a starlit canopy, casting a soft, gauze-like glow over the sands of Sentry Oasis. Along the outer dunes, Swadian light infantry carry flickering grease-soaked torches, their flames dancing against the deepening blue of the desert night. Inside the fortress walls, the streets are as bright as day. Torches nestled in stone grooves illuminate a scene of frantic, joyful preparation. Peasants and laborers hurry to set out wooden tables and chairs. The air is thick with a mouth-watering aroma. 10 golden-brown desert antelopes, roasted to perfection, sit alongside baskets of sliced bread and precious spices. Great barrels of steaming cabbage soup stand ready, but the true prize lies cooling in the spring water. 10 barrels of amber ale, purchased by Manite to celebrate their hard-won victories. The soldiers off-duty and hungry watch as the dripping barrels are hauled from the water. They can almost taste the cool, malty sweetness, the refreshing sting of the first sip followed by a savory bite of salted meat. Yet, despite their thirst, no one touches a drop. They wait in silent, heartfelt reverence for their leader, Lord Cand. As the guard shifts and the heavy-armored Swadian infantry begin their internal patrols, a sudden gasp ripples through the crowd. Fatties and Manide look up, their eyes widening in disbelief. There, towering 10 meters into the sky, are 4 massive stone arrow towers. The city walls have transformed, now standing 7 meters high with sturdy wooden lofts designed to shield crossbowmen from wind, rain, and enemy fire. It is a miracle of construction, a divine gift from Lord Kan that brings tears of relief to the peasants' eyes. Suddenly, the sharp blast of a horn shatters the peace. A strange troop is approaching from the east, a Ravenstern ranger shouts from the heights. The festive mood vanishes instantly. Fatties barks orders, and the soldiers, moments ago dreaming of ale, snap into a combat stance, rushing toward the battlements. But as the scouts reach the dunes, the alarm is cut short. The ranger calls out again, his voice tinged with embarrassment. Wait, they are not enemies. Emerging from the shadows of the dunes is a disciplined column of 100 men. They march in eerie silence, 50 Vigor archers and 50 Swadian crossbowmen, new reinforcements arriving at the land of miracles to pledge their lives to Lord Kan. The banquet, it seems, has just gained 100 more guests. 4 desert bandits gallop to the crest of a massive sand dune, their horses skidding to a halt as cold sweat beaded on the riders' temples. Below them, less than 100 meters away, 100 crossbowmen stood in grim formation. The bandits' hands hovered over their scimitars, but they froze, knowing that the slightest movement would invite a covering rain of iron. "Don't be impulsive," the lead bandit muttered, slowly raising his hands from his blade. He nudged his horse forward and called out, "This is the fief of Lord Kan. Stranger troops, state your intentions." The tension broke as the archers lowered their weapons. 2 leaders stepped forward from the ranks. "We are 50 crossbowmen from the kingdom of Swadia," one announced. "And we are 50 Vigor archers," the other added, "here to follow Lord Kan." Relief washed over the bandits. With smiles of welcome, they escorted the reinforcements back to the sentry Oasis. At the city gates, Swadian infantry cheered for their kin, and the night fatties arrived to greet them. "Your arrival," fatties remarked with a satisfied nod, "finally brings our defensive towers to life." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the oasis transformed. The tense atmosphere of potential war dissolved into a vibrant banquet. Inside the ruler's hall, Lord Kan woke from an exhausted sleep to a soft knock. It was his advisor, Manhwa. "Lord Kan, the banquet is beginning. The new archers have arrived." Kan stepped out into the night air where the street was as bright as day. Torches flickered against the stone, and a thunderous cheer erupted from the soldiers. To them, Kan was more than a lord, he was their sole faith. "Let the feast begin," Kan signaled. The air filled with the scent of roasted antelope, dried meats, and fresh ale. Soldiers and peasants alike fell upon the food with joy, though Kan maintained a strict limit of 1 bowl of ale per man. Danger was still a constant shadow in the desert, and only fools celebrated to excess. As the feast ended and the peasants cleared the tables, Kan climbed to the top of the ruler's hall. He looked out over his growing domain, flanked by his elite Ravenston Rangers. Tomorrow, the caravans would depart, and the trivial matters of the week would be settled. Kan stared into the deepening darkness of the Nalan Desert, a cold smile touching his lips. The expeditionary force of the Grey Mane Kingdom was coming, and he was ready. Summer was coming to an end. Although the Mannheim coast bordered the Nalan Desert and never experienced distinct seasons, the many races living there could feel the intensity of the heat beginning to fade. A breeze from the Star Sea swept across the coast, turning the leaves a withered yellow. Autumn was arriving, and with it, the merchant sails. At the capital port of the Grey Mane Kingdom, the air was thick with the smell of salt and the sound of commerce. Lesser gnolls labored on the stone-paved piers, unloading cargo under the watchful eyes of merchants from every corner of the world. Gnolls, lizardmen, elves, and humans all shed their natural traits of cowardice or honesty, replaced by a singular, cunning focus, earning more silver coins. As the only deepwater port on the coast, this city allowed the Grey Mane gnolls to live in luxury throughout. Docking fees and taxes. It was a monopoly that infuriated the lizardmen. Though the lizardmen were superior navigators, their own ports were shallow and small. They were forced to pay extortionate rents to the gnolls just to trade. This tension had led to war before, a stalemate between the gnolls' superior land infantry and the lizardmen's deadly crossbowmen and secret pirate fleets. But this morning, the fragile peace shifted. 5 warships, unmarked and mysterious, docked at the pier. Shrewd merchants turned pale as they recognized the burly gnoll warriors disembarking. These were the infamous gnoll pirates, known for their brutal boarding combat and heavy chainmail. The Grey Mane Kingdom quickly issued a proclamation. These pirates had been reorganized into the official military to ensure sea safety. The veteran merchants knew better. This was no act of peace. For the high-ranking Knoll officials, this was a strategic pivot. They realized they could never truly defeat the Elven or Lizardman navies on the turbulent Star Sea. Instead, they would turn their eyes toward the solid Earth. Their plan, to cross the Nalan Desert and conquer the human kingdoms to the south. These 300 elite pirates were merely the vanguard. They were to seize the Sentry Oasis and rally the lesser desert tribes. A month later, they would be followed by 3,000 more elite warriors and powerful shamans. In the minds of the Grey Mane officials, the conquest was already won. To them, humans were weak, incapable of matching the archery of the elves or the ferocity of a Knoll. They believed that once their warriors set foot on human soil, a massacre would begin. The sky over the Nalan Desert was faintly bright, the traces of night lingering as dawn touched the Sentry Oasis. Despite the previous night's banquet, the soldiers remained vigilant. Swadian, Saranid, and Vigir troops stood at their posts, Vigir archers on the towers and Swadian crossbowmen behind the reinforced city walls. Though few in number, the compact half-hectare fortress allowed them to mobilize instantly. Lord Kan stepped out of the ruler's hall, his morning drowsiness replaced by sharp focus. "Is everything ready?" he asked. Manhwa, following close behind, confirmed that it was. At the sugar workshop, the piles of coarse salt were gone. In their place stood sacks of refined white salt boiled through the night by hardworking peasants. Kan thanked the exhausted workers, urging them to rest. The mission ahead was critical. Manhwa prepared to lead a caravan of 3 carriages guarded by 10 Saranid riders, 20 elite desert bandits, and 10 Swadian recruits to Giantshi Pass. Their goal, trade with Baron Dylan. "Be careful," Kan warned, his expression grave. He remembered the hostility he faced during his last journey, the ambush by a vassal knight and the suspicious, heroic encounter with a beautiful woman. He knew his presence in the Lion Duchy was a threat to man. "Why?" As the caravan disappeared behind the dunes, Kan turned to Fatties. "Arrange the troops, we are at a turning point. I want no one slacking off." Returning to the ruler's hall, Kan looked toward the future. The fortress lacked housing, and with the threat of the Grey Mane Kingdom looming, he needed a reserve force. He opened the system interface and issued a command: build 43 houses. The cost was steep, 4,300 dinars, but essential. In 7 days, the Oasis would have 50 houses, enough to accommodate 500 civilians. These settlers were more than just mouths to feed, they were the lifeblood of his defense. From these peasants, he could recruit Swadian recruits to replace any fallen elites. As long as he had people, Sentry Oasis would never fall. As he scrolled through the building list, planning his next move in the calm before the storm, a new option caught his eye: a bell tower. Kan's thoughts stirred as the system interface flickered onto his retina. The data was clear and unique. The bell tower, a military structure of stone and bronze, stood apart from any building Kan had seen before. Its defining characteristic: emergency mobilization. In times of war, the tolling of the bell would summon every peasant to arms, temporarily promoting them to Swadian recruits. Kan licked the corner of his mouth. This was a divine skill for defense. With 500 peasants in the fortress, he could instantly conjure a militia capable of stalling any assault. "Build it," Kan commanded. The system chimed in response: cost 1,000 dinar, time 10 days. 10 days was a wait he could afford. Though the High Knoll expeditionary force loomed, Kan knew the desert was a natural moat. Even for the heat-tolerant Knolls, crossing the Nalan Desert would take over 30 days. He began to deduce their strategy. They would strike fast, seize the Sentry Oasis, and use it as a foothold to bleed the human kingdoms dry. But the Grey Mane Kingdom had miscalculated. They didn't expect the Oasis to have a lord, or to be a fortress designed to make them bleed until they ran dry. Soon, a construction team of 400 men arrived, led by a prosperous, chubby foreman. The tranquility of the Oasis vanished, replaced by the rhythmic chaos of hammers and saws. Hundreds of carriages hauled stone and wood to the southern district. The scale of the project was massive: 43 new houses and the tower. Fatties, ever the cautious commander, watched the 400 workers with a wary eye. On the city walls, Swadian crossbowmen and Vigir archers kept their weapons ready, their cold gazes making the laborers tremble. Kan eventually had to intervene, ordering his troops to stand down so the work could proceed. Time blurred into a cycle of labor. By Monday, Khan's military expenses topped 6,000 dinar, but his coffers remained full from the slave trade. Though the caravan leader, Jocelyn, departed for Rivasheg, putting the trade on hold, the fortress continued to transform. By Friday, the residential area was complete. 50 standard Swadian houses now lined 4 brand-new streets. And there, near the ruler's hall, the 5-meter-high bell tower reached for the sky. In just 2 days, the bronze bell would be ready to ring, while far to the south at the desert post station, the first scouts returned from the pass. The Nalan Desert, at dusk. The sunlight struggles unyieldingly, casting a final, golden glow over the dunes like a layer of delicate gauze, but as the sun sinks in the west, the light of Friday fades, and a new world arrives. Night falls. The stars fill the sky, shining with a brilliant intensity, while the bright moon rises to push back the deep darkness. There is a sudden, sharp chill in the air. Manhide's warhorse snorts impatiently. Feeling the plummeting temperature, Manhide wraps his fur robe tighter around his chest. Fortunately, he sighs, we were well prepared. These robes, crafted from soft antelope hide, were a strategic purchase from Giantshi Pass. They are the same reliable garments the peasants of North County used to survive the bitter winters. Now, every member of the caravan is draped in fur, their legs protected by warm leggings. Even at high speeds, the bone-chilling wind cannot reach them. Manhide flicks the reins, moving his horse forward. Behind him, the Saranid cavalry are finishing their dinner and packing the camp. They move with disciplined speed, extinguishing campfires with sand and bundling tents into the wagons. Lord Khan's warning echoes in their minds, time waits for no one. Let us go, Manhide commands. The caravan sets off. 3 elite desert bandits sit atop the wagons, flicking their whips to urge the draft horses onward. The modified wooden wheels groan, leaving deep ruts in the sand under the weight of their haul. This trip was a success. The wagons are heavy with grain, tools, and 20 bags of expensive, fine white salt, a monopoly that will bring in 1,000 large silver coins. Yet Manhide looks back with a hint of regret. The scale is too small. Sentry Oasis is hungry for growth, and its appetite increases every day. His thoughts turn to Baron Dillon. The Baron had rejected Manhide's request to buy arrows and crossbow bolts. Worse, the man had offered to send 30 of his own guards to help protect the Oasis. Manhide shakes his head, a mocking smile touching his lips. He really is wary. It was a transparent trap, an attempt to invite a wolf into the house. Manhide knows he must report this treachery to Lord Khan immediately. Suddenly, as they crest a massive sand dune, the mood shifts. Excitement ripples through the men. Look, someone cries, it is our fortress. There, rising from the sands of Sentry Oasis, is the stronghold, transformed and defiant. The exhausted cavalrymen cheer, their week-long trek finally at an end. Manhide chuckles, wah. Ving his hand forward, speed up, tonight we sleep in our own beds, and we shall not worry about enemies in the dark. The desert air fills with a singular, roaring cry, long live Lord Khan. The stars hung bright over the desert as Manhide and his caravan finally approached the fortress of Durham. They were coming home, but at the gates there were no smiles, only the cold, sharp vigilance of the Vigir archers. From high atop the arrow towers, these veterans of Calradia tracked every movement in the hazy moonlight. They had been warned by the night fatties, in this world trust is a luxury one cannot afford. The alarm was raised instantly. 10 elite desert bandits, the fortress's light cavalry, thundered out from the eastern gate to investigate. Behind them, Swadian infantry stood ready to hold the line at any cost. However, the tension soon broke. The scouts recognized the travelers, falling in behind the 3 heavily loaded carriages like a humble honor guard. The word spread quickly, the genius merchant Manhide had returned. As the thick wooden gates groaned open, fatties rode out to meet them. He saw the bone-deep exhaustion etched into the faces of the men and horses alike. They had trekked through the unforgiving sands for 5 days and nights. Welcome back, Fatty said softly. Go to your rooms. Lord Khan says your reports can wait until tomorrow. Inside the ruler's hall, a warm fire and a quiet feast awaited. There was honey-coated bread, thick meat porridge, and sweet dates to restore their strength. Lord Khan sat with them, watching as the usually refined Manhide devoured his meal with uncharacteristic hunger. Eat, Khan encouraged with a nod. Tomorrow we shall hold a banquet in your honor. With stomachs full and the desert chill dispelled, the weary travelers collapsed into their beds. Silence reclaimed the fortress, broken only by the rhythmic pacing of the sentries. Time passed in the deep dark, until a faint sliver of light touched the eastern horizon. On the roofs of the coops, the sand grouse flapped their wings and let out a piercing cry **cockadoodle-doo** announcing the dawn. Then came the heavy, resonant **dong, dong, dong of the newly installed bronze bell. Durham stirred to life. Peasants emerged to tend the wheat fields and gather eggs, while soldiers sharpened their blades on the training grounds. As blue smoke rose from the kitchens to feed the 600 souls within the walls, a new day of industry and ambition began in the heart of the Oasis. The morning air at Sentry Oasis carries a new, savory weight. As curls of smoke rise from the kitchen, the aroma of toasted bread and roasting meat drifts through the settlement. The peasant women, robust, meticulous, and skilled, have transformed the once bland staples into true delicacies. Slices of bread are toasted over low fires until golden brown, while dried meat is shredded and roasted until it drips with fragrant oil. But the true star of the morning is a new invention: sweet egg drop wheat porridge. This thick, comforting soup made from softened wheat, crushed dates, sugar, and 20 whisked eggs has become an instant favorite. The soldiers have even found a unique way to enjoy it, spreading the sweet, glutinous porridge over crispy toast and pairing it with salty, roasted meat. Even Lord Cand, accustomed to the luxuries of Lion Castle, gives the meal high praise. As a superior, he enjoys even more lavish portions, a privilege of rank he has no intention of changing. Accompanied by 10 Swadian infantry, Cand performs his morning inspection of the fortress Durham. He finds his subjects diligent and tireless. From the construction teams to the patrolling light cavalry, there is no hint of laziness. Satisfied, Cand returns to the ruler's hall to find the merchant, Manhwa, waiting. Manhwa reports a successful mission to Giantshi Pass. By trading 20 bags of fine white salt, he secured 1,000 large silver coins, using a portion to buy 500 iron farming tools and 2 wagons of wheat. However, a shadow falls over the report. Baron Dillon refused to sell arrows or crossbow bolts. Cand sneers at his uncle's transparent attempt to limit the Oasis's military strength. Manhwa calmly suggests that as the Baron becomes more dependent on the salt trade, trust will eventually follow. Cand is less optimistic. He suspects that is exactly when the Baron will strike. Yet, with 7-meter-high walls and 600 loyal souls, Cand knows the desert heat will break any invading army long before they reach his gates. Looking ahead, Cand instructs Manhwa to expand the trade. While wagons struggle in the soft desert sand, Cand dreams of forming a massive camel caravan, a feat only possible through his unique system. But first, he must stabilize the Oasis and prepare for the looming threat of the Grey Mane Knolls. Only through victory can he claim his right to the world beyond the desert. Breakfast at the ruler's hall was a brief, functional affair. Cand sat at the long table with his 2 trusted companions, Fatties and Manhwa, discussing the future of Sentry Oasis. Though the fortress of Durham was small, the desert was vast and unforgiving. As the meal ended, the group split, Fatties to the city walls and Manhwa to the caravans. Cand's instructions were clear: every silver coin earned from the salt trade must be converted into vital supplies, grain, tools, and arrows. In the barren Nalan desert, gold was useless if there was nothing to eat. As Cand rubbed his brow, a sense of heavy responsibility settled over him. Fatties was a commander of heavy cavalry, Manhwa was a merchant. Neither was suited for the tedious grind of internal affairs. Cand realized with a sigh that the novice period of his leadership was over. The system no longer granted easy rewards for simple scouting. Now progress required blood and strategic planning. Determined Cand he dead to the 3rd floor of the hall to retrieve 2 mystical curios, the Page of Fertile Soil and the Page of Clear Spring. In this wasteland, these were his greatest assets. By summoning and defeating elemental giants, he could harvest life-giving soil and fresh water. At the East Gate, Cand summoned 20 Ravenston Rangers, elite, Tier 5 archers whose presence made the local Vigir guards look on in silent awe. "Withdraw the scouts," Cand commanded. "Let the Rangers take the wall." With a thought, Cand activated the Page of Fertile Soil. 30 meters beyond the gate, the sands churned, and 7 massive earth elemental giants rose from the dunes, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. But the battle was over before it truly began. The Ravenston Rangers moved with terrifying precision. Their heavy white bows were drawn into perfect full moons, a feat of strength that left the onlookers breathless. Swish, swish, swish. Bodkin arrows whistled through the air, piercing the glowing eye sockets of the giants with unerring accuracy. The massive stone forms stiffened, rippled, and collapsed into piles of rich, dark earth. Battle resolved, a ranger stated calmly. Can smiled, the tension in his chest easing slightly. Indeed, notify the peasants, he ordered the guards, spread that soil into the wheat fields, and bring the elemental gems to the hall. Sentry Oasis was growing. It was a slow, difficult birth, but with every arrow fired and every seed planted, Cand was carving a kingdom out of the dust. The archery of the Ravenston Rangers was nothing short of impeccable. In the realm of rapid-fire precision, even the famed Vigir sharpshooters could not compare. For the elemental giants summoned by Cand's curios, this was pure misfortune. Outside the city walls, the giants had already collapsed into piles of lifeless earth. Once their weakness was mastered, they couldn't take 3 steps. Bodkin arrows, arriving in a blurred instant, struck the elemental gems in their eye sockets, splitting the vital organs and turning the monsters back into dust. Cand recalled secret historical documents describing these giants as ace troops, fleshless, fearless, and capable of routing forces 10 times their size. The books never mentioned a weakness, suggesting only that a massive army might wear them down. But for Cand, such a struggle was unnecessary. He had seen the truth, the gems were the key. As Tier 5 units, the Ravenston Rangers used their heavy bows to shatter those hidden crystals with ease. Before him, 3 water elemental giants were struck. Their crystalline blue bodies vibrated, turned into waves, and collapsed like a waterfall into the lake below with a thunderous splash. "This is quite easy," Cand remarked, a slight smile touching his lips. He turned to the Vigir archers and Swadian crossbowmen. "Go into the lake and retrieve those 3 elemental gems. I expect to see them in the ruler's hall." The lake was clear and shallow, making the task simple for the men. Soon, the water gems joined 7 earth gems on Cand's long table. However, he noticed a problem. No one had leveled up. The experience from 9 giants was spread too thin across his large force. He realized that in the future, he must select specific units to feed this experience to, ensuring they grow into high-tier elites. Cand dismissed the rangers to their posts and continued his inspection. His gaze fell upon his unit interface. A plus sign glowed behind 5 Saranid riders who had followed him through countless skirmishes. "Upgrade," Cand commanded. 400 dinars vanished. A surge of magical energy swirled through the air, engulfing the 5 riders. When the light faded, they had transformed into Mamluks, the strongest heavy cavalry of the desert. Wrapped in exquisite chainmail and iron plates, both men and horses were walking fortresses. They carried heavy lances, elite shields, and terrifying 2-handed iron maces designed to crush bone and armor alike. The surrounding soldiers looked on with fervor and respect. Even the Swadian heavy cavalry recognized these men as equals, the only force capable of meeting a Swadian knight head-on. "Good, very good," Cand whispered, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "In the future, you will be the most elite edge of the dagger that is Sentry Oasis." Cand nodded to himself, his eyes sweeping over the new arrivals. The 5 Mamluks stood like pillars of iron, the true foundation of the Sarand Sultanate. Though few in number, they exuded a spirit that dwarfed the nearby Sarand riders and desert bandit elites. The 25 desert bandit elites, once arrogant and imperious, now looked like desert quails cowering before majestic falcons. They were wild monsters compared to the Mamluks, who were the Sultanate's ultimate trump card, the soldiers meant to shatter enemy lines and secure victory. Only the 15 Sarand riders maintained some composure. While Cand utilized them as light cavalry due to their leather armor and poor close-quarters skills, they were, at heart, regular soldiers. "In that case," Cand whispered, his voice low and contemplative. He knew his order of battle required more speed. The Mamluks belonged with the Swadian knights in the heavy cavalry formation, acting as armored tanks to crush the front lines. With a silent command to the system, Cand recruited 20 more desert bandits for 600 dinars. Near the almost finished bell tower, the heavy wooden gates of the camp swung open. 20 fierce figures strode out, dressed in brown leather and linen robes, clutching rawhide shields and spears. They approached Cand with a respectful, drawn-out greeting, their bandit pride instantly vanishing the moment they caught sight of the Mamluks. "Welcome aboard," Kant said with a firm nod. These bandits were his eyes and ears, specialists in scouting, harassment, and cutting supply lines, while they lacked steel of a Swadian knight, their ability to strike and vanish was invaluable. "Mamluks to the heavy cavalry, desert bandits to the light," Kant ordered. With a wave of his hand, the troops dispersed. The Mamluks joined the 50 Swadian knights, a wall of chainmail and plate armor ready for a decisive charge. The week passed in a blur of efficiency until the bronze bell atop the tower rang out *dong, dong, dong signaling a new Monday. Kant checked his ledgers. His tax income was a meager 540 dinars, while his military wages had ballooned to 6,188 dinars. Undeterred, Kant recruited another 20 desert bandits for the new week, but as the 600 dinars vanished, a sudden chime echoed in his mind. A new dialogue box flashed across his retina. Ding! Temporary mission issued. A system dialogue box flickered onto Kant's retina with a sharp chime. Ding! Temporary mission issued. The words hung in the air, undercurrent rises. The reward was a staggering 10,000 dinars, but the warning that followed was chilling. Be cautious, be cautious, be cautious. Kant narrowed his eyes, his heart tightening as if gripped by an invisible force. The system had never been this insistent. He looked toward the north, toward the Mannheim coast and the Grey Mane Kingdom. He knew what this meant. The high-level jackalmen were no longer a distant threat. Their expeditionary force was coming to reclaim the Oasis lookout. Kant moved with sudden, sharp purpose. He returned to the administrative hall and summoned Knight Fatties. When the night arrived, the air in the room was heavy. "It's them," Kant said simply, tapping the table. "The Grey Mane Kingdom." Fatties didn't flinch, though his pulse quickened. "I'll go prepare," he replied. "Not yet," Kant cautioned. "The undercurrent is about to rise. We have time, but we must not waste a second." He issued a string of rapid-fire orders: cancel all leaves, raise the alert level to the highest, and send the desert bandits north to scout a 3-kilometer radius. Moments later, the urgent, rhythmic clang of the bronze bell shattered the silence of the oasis. Dong, 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 farmers dropped their tools in the fields, light infantry abandoned their patrols and sprinted toward the fortress, their lamellar armor rattling. Inside the walls, Fatties stood before the assembled troops, his sword drawn and gleaming. "War is about to begin," he declared, his voice booming across the square. The fortress transformed into a hive of grim activity. Livestock were driven inside and supplies were hauled into the stone towers. Kant looked at the lush date palm trees, his pride, and realized he might have to burn them all to deny the enemy siege timber. As the desert bandits galloped into the dunes, the clouds of war finally settled over the desert. Far to the north, at the natural salt mine, 300 weary jackalman pirates arrived to fight. Nd only gnawed bones and torn tents. The scouts Kant had killed weeks ago were gone, eaten by their own kind. The pirates bared their fangs, their faces twisting with ferocity. The undercurrent had reached the shore, and the storm was finally here. A hoarse, hateful howl echoes from the salt mine, a sound of pure rage. The leader of the Knoll pirates stares across the shimmering heat of the Naran desert, his face a mask of scars and exhaustion. They have traveled from the Mannheim coast, bypassing the deadly Devil's Zone, only to find nothing, no welcoming party, no camp. Only the vast, indifferent dunes. Their canteens are empty of water, filled instead with foul-smelling urine, a desperate guarantee of life that even a high-ranking Knoll would normally scorn. The leader looks down, his bloodshot eyes narrowing at scattered white bones. He crushes a sun-bleached leg bone under his paw with a sickening crunch. "Something is wrong," he rasps, his voice like grinding stones. He draws a massive two-handed battle axe. "To the low-ranking tribe, we will take their water and use them as cannon fodder." A desperate bestial roar erupts from 300 parched throats. They march. For 30 days, they have carried heavy chainmail and steel through the scorching waste, pushed to the absolute limit of eldritch endurance. One day and one night later, they reach the coordinates of the local tribe, but they stop in their tracks, eyes wide with horror. The village is gone. Only ash, charred ruins, and gnawed bone fragments remain. The anger that sustained them vanishes, replaced by a cold, hollow despair. "What is this?" the leader murmurs. Suddenly, a movement. From a deep pit in the sand, a group of low-ranking gnolls emerges. They are small, wretched creatures, but the pirates notice something that makes their hearts race. The fur on the creatures' chins is wet *. Water. The pirates charge, driving the scavengers away. At the bottom of a 7-meter pit, a tiny, pathetic spring seeps into a pool the size of a wash basin. The leader leaps down, gulping the liquid before forcing himself to stop. 3 sips each, he bellows, quickly. As his warriors desperately suck moisture from the wet sand, the leader looks south toward the outpost Oasis. His mind races. Have the human kingdoms discovered their plan? He shakes off the fear, his eyes turning crimson with a lingering madness. We rest for one day, he declares, gripping his axe. Then we march south. If there are humans at the Oasis, we will slaughter them just as we did on the high seas. From the surrounding dunes, the low-ranking gnolls watch and howl, a chorus of primitive, beast-like despair. The leader smiles cruelly, watching his new, ready-made cannon fodder. The invasion has not ended yet. The scorching sun blazed at high noon, its immense power enveloping the Naran desert in a heat so intense it felt as if the air itself might incinerate. North of Watchman Oasis, a patrol of 10 desert bandits moved leisurely across the rolling dunes. Despite the heat, they were prepared for battle, spears gripped tightly, leather shields strapped to their arms. After a meticulous sweep of the sands, they turned their snorting horses back toward the fortress, unaware that 300 formidable gnoll pirates from the Grameen Kingdom had already occupied the tribal ruins to the south. Though the news of the vanguard's arrival had not yet reached the patrol, the fortress of Drontheim was already on high alert. As the bandits returned, they saw the 10-meter-high administrative hall and the reinforced 7-meter walls bristling with soldiers. Archers and crossbowmen scanned the horizon from every vantage point. Under the strict martial law of the Swadian light infantry, the bandits dismounted and led their horses through the gates on foot. Inside the administrative hall, Kant sat at a lavish lunch with his commanders, Manhwa and Fatties. They dined on roasted bread, pan-fried lamb chops, and honey-coated dessert, all seasoned with precious spices. Yet Kant's expression remained grim. He asked. When both men reported nothing, Kant's anxiety deepened. To him, an invisible enemy was more dangerous than one in sight. "We cannot afford to be unprepared," Kant declared. He ordered the immediate destruction of the 5 acres of date palm trees to the north. Though Manhwa hesitated, noting that the trees were worth 12,000 dinars in potential harvest, Kant was firm. "Burn them all," he commanded. He would leave nothing to aid the enemy in a siege. By afternoon, the trees were felled, their trunks hauled inside for timber and their branches piled for fuel. The night passed under the vigilant eyes of the sentries, but at dawn, a sudden clamor erupted. Kant was jolted awake by his guards. "Refugees have arrived," they reported. Kant rushed to the top of the administrative hall, looking eastward past the crenellated battlements. There, huddled in the sand, were roughly 300 terrified people, surrounded by 40 desert bandits who circled them like vultures. Kant stood atop the administrative hall, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the eastern sand dunes. Below, a timid crowd of 310 refugees huddled together, their Swadian attire dusty and worn. They were a stark contrast to the 40 desert bandits circling them, scimitars drawn and gleaming with a chilling, saronid light. Suddenly, a dialogue box flickered onto Kant's retina. "A temporary mission, refugees before the war." The system's warning was cold and logical. In times of conflict, these innocent souls would be a burden, mouths to feed with no chores to perform. If conscripted, they would be nothing more than cannon fodder. Kant hesitated. Was it worth the risk? Footsteps echoed behind him. Fatties ascended the stairs, his face solemn. He reported that the refugees had come seeking the Lord's Benev. Olents to help resist the coming enemy. "Fatties," Kant asked, his voice deceptively calm, "should we accept them? We face a powerful foe." Fatties did not waver. "I believe it is necessary, my lord. They are our reserve soldiers, the fresh blood we will need when the ranks thin from prolonged combat." He paused, then added softly, "And our food supply is abundant." "How long?" Kant pressed. 3 months, Fatties replied. 3 months in a world of swords and magic where sieges could last years that felt dangerously short. Kant looked down at the fortress of Drachenberg. He knew that while food was scarce, life was scarcer. "I understand," Kant finally spoke. "Have them bathe in the lake, give them clean clothes, and prepare a feast. I will accept them." As fatties left to make the arrangements, the system chimed. Mission complete. 1,000 renown and 1 honor point were credited to Khan's soul. Below, grateful cheers erupted from the dunes. The refugees believed they had found salvation, but Khan knew better. War is cruel. By becoming his subjects, they had merely traded one danger for another. When the emergency bells rang, these men would have to stand upon the walls and hold the line, or become the very corpses that paved the road to victory. With his new honor point, Khan opened the system store. A treasure chest glowed with a prismatic light. Ding! He had received a Lion Knight Order medal from the Kingdom of Sarlian. Khan stared at the artifact, his expression stunned. The secrets of this world were only just beginning to unfold. Khan was no stranger to the Kingdom of Sarlian. The Lion Knight Order medal he now held was a relic of the ancient Kingdom of Pender, the same ancestral root shared by the elite rangers of Ravidin currently guarding Watchman Oasis. While Ravidin had long ago claimed independence, Sarlian remained the true successor to Pender's might, suppressing all rivals with its legendary heavy cavalry. Khan materialized the medal in his palm. It was a fan-shaped shield, engraved with a majestic golden lion against a crimson backdrop. In the world of heavy armor and lances, the Lion Knights were second to none, perhaps surpassed only by the mythical Swadian royal knights. A timely help indeed, Khan muttered. The medal possessed a divine property. It shortened a cavalry unit's charging distance by 30%, forcing warhorses into a devastating, full-speed gallop much faster than normal. On the battlefield, an unstoppable heavy cavalry charge is a tidal wave of iron. Men and horses become a single, crushing force that leaves nothing behind but a pulp of flesh and shattered bone. Khan knew he was a strategist, not a frontline commander. He needed a leader who lived for the charge. He summoned Fatties, a knight of Swadian nobility. When Fatties touched the medal, his eyes widened. "I feel a power within this," he whispered. "It is yours to lead with," Khan replied, watching as the medal's golden glow imprinted itself onto the knight's surcoat. But the time for ceremony was short. Khan turned his mind to the horizon. "Fatties, how long until the jackal men reach us from the ruins?" Fatties paused. 3 days, my lord." Khan's fingers tapped a rapid, rhythmic beat on the table. "Then they arrive tomorrow." The order was given: double the night patrols. As dusk fell, the oasis was transformed. Date palms were leveled, reed beds cleared, and fences torn down to ensure no cover remained for the enemy. Stones were piled high atop the battlements. Sunday morning arrived with the tolling of the bronze bell. The light cavalry, Sarandian riders, and desert bandits galloped out for the dawn patrol. They crested the northern dunes, but the lead scout suddenly yanked his reins, bringing his horse to a sliding halt. There, on the shimmering horizon, were thousands of dark specks. Like a slow, black tide of ants, the Jackalman army was marching. The enemy had finally arrived. Sunday, the final day of the week. High atop a sun-scorched sand dune, a patrol of desert bandits reined in their horses, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They had expected a routine morning, but instead they discovered a dark, shifting mass advancing across the wastes. Judging by the scale, an enemy force was marching straight for the Watchman Oasis. At their current pace, they would arrive in less than 2 hours. "Don't just stand there in a daze," the squad leader barked, spitting into the sand. He tightened his grip on his spear, his voice sharp with urgency. "Damn it, we need to go." These were not men who fled from fear, they were reconnaissance cavalry. They turned their mounts and galloped back toward the oasis at a breakneck pace. On the arrow towers, the vigilant Viger archers spotted the hurried return. They knew the custom: the bandits never returned before noon. The message was clear: the enemy has arrived. Inside the fortress, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Swadian crossbowmen rushed to the battlements, while light infantry heaved open the heavy city gates to let the scouts through. The lead bandit didn't stop until he reached the administration hall. "Halt!" 2 Swadian guards commanded, hands on their scabbards. "State your purpose." "I must see Lord Kant," the bandit gasped. "Enemy troops are approaching, arrival in 2 hours." Moments later, the scout stood before Lord Kant in the torchlit hall. Kant's expression was grave. He wasted no time on pleasantries. "Scale, number, and composition. Speak." "A force of hyena men, my lord," the bandit reported. "Roughly 1,500 to 2,000 infantry." 2,000 enemies. Kant's heart beat faster, but his mind remained cold. He dismissed the scout and summoned his commanders, Fatties and Manid. The Oasis transformed into a hive of steel. Vigor archers manned the towers, Swadian crossbowmen lined the walls, and even the farmers climbed the battlements with scythes. In heavy stones, every soul prepared to fight for their home. When Fatties and Manid arrived, Kant looked at them solemnly. This siege must not fail. If it does, everything we have built collapses. Though outnumbered with only 324 soldiers against 2,000, Kant felt a surge of confidence. His men were elites, clad in plate and chainmail that even a baron would envy. "I have a plan," Kant said, his voice echoing in the hall. "We will not simply wait. I want the light cavalry to leave the fortress now. They will harass the hyena men like the Kurgits of the plains, striking and retreating until the enemy is too fatigued to even lift their blades." Fatties nodded in grim agreement. At his command, the twin gates of Drashan fortress creaked open, and the light cavalry, sneers etched onto their faces, galloped into the vast, shifting dunes. These men were not built for the rigid walls of a siege. They were former desert bandits, masters of the Saranid sands. In the open desert, they were like fish leaping into the sea. The force split into scattered groups: 15 Saranid riders, 25 elite desert bandits, and 40 standard bandits. Though separated by dunes, they communicated through rhythmic shouts and signals known only to their kind. They moved like shadows, slippery as loaches through the crevices of the sand. High atop the administration building, Kant watched with Fatties and Manid. "They are good," Kant remarked. Fatties, a Swadian knight of noble breeding, offered only a dismissive nod. To him, these light-armored Saranids were mere nuisances compared to heavy Swadian cavalry, yet he conceded they would cause the necessary trouble and confusion. Kant didn't need them to win the war, he needed them to harass. Between them, they carried over 300 heavy javelins. At close range, these projectiles could punch through shields and mail armor alike. Those ghouls, Kant thought darkly, can only pray for luck. "Here they come," Fatties whispered, his eyes narrowing. To the north, the horizon crawled with black dots. The bronze bell of the fortress began to toll, *boom, boom, boom, echoing urgently. Archers notched their arrows. 550 civilians stood ready to become conscripts. Kant gripped the stone battlements. He had prepared for this since the day he discovered the natural salt mines. This was not just a battle, it was a fight for his future. But as the enemy drew within 2,000 meters, the atmosphere changed from tension to confusion. "What is this?" someone muttered. The mass of 3,000 ghouls was not the elite expeditionary force of the Grayman Kingdom they had feared. Instead, the dunes were choked with low-tier ghouls, the same tattered, beast-headed creatures Kant usually sold into slavery. They were disorganized, wielding crude stone bludgeons and wearing rags. Kant's fists clenched, his voice trembling with a mix of insult and fury. "Are they joking with me? Where is the real army? Where are the warriors of the Mannheim coast?" Before him stood a sea of trash, and the real enemy was nowhere to be seen. High atop the shifting dunes, 300 Jackalman pirates stood frozen, their two-handed battle axes heavy in their hands. Their chests burned with a raging inferno of dehydration. And as they gazed upon the stone walls and towering arrow towers of the outpost Oasis, their grim expressions turned to pure despair. "This isn't right," the pirate leader growled, his knuckles white against his weapon. He had been deceived. The inferior tribes they gathered at the watering holes promised an undefended settlement, but before them stood a fortress of stone, a nightmare that required siege engines they simply did not have. A furious howl erupted from the leader's throat, a sound of anguish and desperate hatred. Behind him, his crew joined in, their voices cracked and dry, echoing like the cries of the damned. They were warriors of the Starry Sea, accustomed to boarding ships with ropes and raw courage. But these straight city walls were an absolute barrier. They were the vanguard, the scouts for an expeditionary force of 3,000 sent to secure water and food. Instead, they found ruins and filled in wells. To find even a basin of water, they had been forced to dig pits 7 meters deep. Now, facing a fortified human stronghold, the leader realized the truth. "We failed," he whispered. But the brutal nature of the pirates would not allow a quiet death. "Let us fight," one roared, pointing his blade at the fortress. "We can break the gates. No one matches us in close combat." With a savage growl, the leader agreed. They would use the 3,000 inferior jackalmen they had coerced as cannon fodder. They began their slow advance. crossing the 1,000 meters of open sand toward the walls of Draheim. As they moved, the starving, thirsty tribesmen spotted it, a shimmering lake nestled against the western wall. The sight drove the inferior jackalmen into a frenzy. They broke ranks, ignoring the orders of their pirate masters. "It's a trap," the leader screamed, spotting the Swadian crossbowmen and Vigir archers watching from the towers. But it was too late. Nearly 300 jackalmen plunged into the water, drinking in desperate, frantic gulps. The pirate leader raised his blood-stained axe, hacking down those who tried to flee toward the lake, but the formation was collapsing. The physiological craving for water had blinded them all. And as the chaos unfolded, no one noticed the dozens of human cavalry gathering silently atop the dunes behind them, watching, waiting for the moment the line finally snapped. High atop the watchtowers, a heavy silence hangs over the battlements. The Vigir archers and Swadian crossbowmen stand like statues, their bows drawn into full moons, their iron bolts aimed at the shore below. 30 meters away, the scene is pure chaos. Thousands of low-level jackalmen have broken formation, driven mad by a physiological craving for water. They scramble toward the lake, growling and snapping, swinging spiked clubs at their own kin just to reach the shallows. Kandor stands behind the stone crenellations of the administrative building, watching the carnage with a cold, wintry gaze. Beside him, Fatties and Manhwa wear expressions of grim disdain. They had prepared for a legendary siege. They had even cut down their precious date palms to clear the lines of sight. And for what, this? "These are the enemies we prepared for so diligently," Kandor says, his voice coming through gritted teeth. "This joke is almost too ridiculous." Below, the lake water turns a muddy crimson. The jackalmen are slaughtering each other, trampling the fallen into the silt. They are no longer an army, they are a desperate, starving rabble. Fatties speaks softly, "My lord, this battle is already over." Kandor lets out a sharp, cold snort and waves a hand forward. "Fire all weapons." The command ripples through the air. "Fire, fire all weapons." The Ravenstern Rangers unleash first. From their elevated perch, the whistling of their arrows is incessant, a waterfall of steel raining down upon the shore. Then come the heavy crossbows. Thud, thud, thud. At such close range, the bolts tear through linen and animal skin as if they were paper. Screams of agony erupt as the jackalmen finally realize their peril. They turn to flee, but the Swadian bolts find their marks, piercing lungs and shattering bone. Kandor turns away, his voice flat. "Fatties, lead the heavy cavalry, sally forth." As the south gate groans open, Fatties thunders out at the head of the armored column. Above them, the golden lion of the deterrent presence banner flutters in the desert wind. In the distance, the 300 jackalmen pirates, the only true soldiers in the horde, watch in horror. They see their cannon fodder collapsing and their hope of conquest vanishing into the heat haze. Their leader looks at the fortress one last time, his throat parched, his eyes filled with bitter determination. "Let us go," he mutters to his crew. "We can no longer control these beasts." The pirates retreat into the dunes, abandoning the leaderless rabble to the arrows and the oncoming hooves. The great siege has ended, before it even began. A single desperate howl breaks the silence. Auo, driven by a maddening thirst, a jackalman sprints toward the lake, a grisly pool choked with corpses and stained crimson with blood. He drinks greedily, followed by thousands more who swarm forward in a primal frenzy. High above on the city walls, Vigir archers and Swadian crossbowmen unleash a relentless rain of bolts. The shoreline becomes a graveyard, bodies piling high as the water turns a sickening pink. Even as their companions fall, the jackalmen scramble over the dead, their eyes glowing red with insanity. I begin to tear at each other, maces smashing skulls in a desperate fight for a single drop of blood-soaked water. Lord Kand watches from the battlements, his face a mask of calm, yet a flicker of anger burns in his eyes. He had prepared a masterful defense, expecting a worthy challenge from the elite Grey Mane Kingdom. Instead, he finds himself slaughtering trash, lowly creatures that even raw recruits could defeat. "It is a farce," he whispers, turning away in disgust. "This is not a battle, it is a tragedy of the desperate." As Kand departs, the heavy iron hooves of the Swadian cavalry begin to thunder across the sand. Led by Fatties, 56 armored riders charge into the flank of the disorganized horde. It is a massacre. Fully armored warhorses trample the unarmored jackalmen, while heavy iron maces cave in skulls with every swing. The golden lion banner of intimidation flutters in the wind, shattering what little remains of the enemy's morale. Meanwhile, in the western dunes, a different kind of trap has closed. 300 elite jackalman pirates armored in chainmail and wielding massive battle axes find themselves surrounded by 80 desert bandits. The bandits move like agile sparrows, circling the heavy infantry and peppering them with lethal short javelins. Every time the pirates attempt to charge, the cavalry scatters, only to return and tear away another piece of the formation. The pirate leader looks at his fallen comrades, their armor pierced easily by the whistling javelins. He feels a profound sense of despair. These humans are faster, stronger, and more disciplined than any foe they have ever faced. Realizing there is no escape from this calculated slaughter, the leader swallows hard, his throat dry and hoarse. "We surrender," he croaks, "humans." The battle concluded before noon, under a sun that blazed with merciless intensity. Outside the western city wall, the air grew thick with the metallic scent of blood. Nearly 1,000 jackalmen lay scattered along the lake's edge, their bodies riddled with arrows and trampled like shredded sacks. The carnage was absolute. Crimson streams flowed into the irrigation channels, staining the wheat fields and turning the small lake into a ghastly, red pond. There was no more fighting, only the grim work of the aftermath. Swadian farmers moved among the heaps of fur and bone, their long-handled scythes gleaming. With cold precision, they pressed the blades against the throats of the fallen, severing windpipes to ensure that those who had fallen would never rise again. Lord Cant had been clear: Fort Drasham had no use for the wounded. To prevent plague, the bodies were salvaged from the water, chopped into fragments and buried in the marsh. In a month's time, this grisly fertilizer would produce lush green fodder for the livestock, but the cost had been high. To the north, the once-lush date palm grove was gone, razed to the ground to deny the enemy cover. It would take 10 years for the trees to return. Angered by the loss of the grove, the Swadian infantry vented their frustration on the survivors. They whipped the jackalman prisoners with heavy sword scabbards, shattering fangs and tearing lips. These prisoners, exhausted by a month of starvation and thirst, offered no resistance. They walked with heads bowed, their spirits broken long before the first blow landed. Among them were 300 high-ranking jackalman pirates, their once shiny fur now matted with desert dust. When one dared to glare at his captors, a desert bandit scimitar quickly corrected the insolence. Those who moved too slowly were struck. Those who tried to break their bonds were executed on the spot, their heads rolling under the iron hooves of the desert horses. Inside the administrative hall, Lord Cant sat in grim silence. His fingers tapped a rhythmic, restless beat on the table, even as a mental notification appeared confirming the completion of his quest and a reward of 10,000 dinars. His rage did not flicker. The system warned him, this is not the end, only the first wave. Cant looked at them with gloomy eyes. There were no casualties among his men. It hadn't been a battle, it had been a massacre. And as the system chimed again, signaling that his troops were ready to level up from the experience, Cant knew the true tsunami was yet to come. The slaughter was over and the knot in Cant's heart finally loosened. An epic victory and 5 points of honor to show for it. With a thought, he summoned the system interface. Before his eyes, the data shimmered. Hundreds of Swadian peasants and seasoned warriors stood ready for advancement. Cant frowned. While his melee troops were primed for promotion, his archers, who had rained death upon the jackalmen, remained stagnant. "System," he questioned, "why can so few reach the 5th tier?" The reply was blunt. Although the battle was large, the enemies were low-level, starving, and broken. Their deaths provided only enough experience to elevate the mid-tier ranks. Only 10 Swadian heavy cavalry could ascend to the legendary status of Swadian knights. Cant nodded. Quality over quantity, always, upgrade all, he commanded. 8,690 dinars vanished instantly. Outside, a surge of data chains enveloped the fortress. 500 peasants, once mere laborers, were transformed. In a heartbeat, years of phantom training were etched into their minds and muscles. Their rags became iron-studded leather, their pitchforks became heavy military spears. The transformation was staggering. Cant's forces now boasted 10 Swadian knights, 37 heavy cavalry, and 500 disciplined militiamen. His total strength now exceeded 1,000 elite soldiers. He looked out from the administrative hall toward the eastern military zone. There, over 2,000 jackalmen captives huddled in the dirt, weak, fearful, and defeated. 2. They weren't just prisoners, they were a gold mine. When the caravan arrived next month, these captives would be sold, sending his treasury into the stratosphere. A confident smile touched Kant's lips. The watchman Oasis was no longer a vulnerable outpost, it was a shark with iron teeth. Even if the Grey Mane Kingdom sent its full expeditionary force across the desert, they would find not a group of beggars, but a wall of steel. With nearly 150 heavy cavalry ready to crush any infantry line, the desert now belonged to him. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. As Fatties and Manhwa hurried to organize the new barracks, Kant stepped out into the sun. The air was thick with the scent of victory and the promise of a kingdom yet to come. Interrogation was never a concern for Kandor. At his command, 10 Swadian infantrymen marched 5 high-ranking jackalmen to the entrance of the administrative hall. With brutal efficiency, the soldiers kicked the backs of the captives' knees, forcing the robed creatures to stumble and kneel before their lord. The jackalmen growled in humiliation, their fangs bared. In response, the Swadians drew their bastard swords and plunged them into the dirt beside the prisoners, a silent, gleaming threat. Kandor looked down at the captives from the Grey Mane Kingdom. "Why," he asked calmly, "are you invading my fiefdom?" Defiance met his question. The jackalmen stared back with bloodshot eyes, their gazes filled with a murderous resentment. Kandor merely chuckled. "A gaze cannot kill," he whispered coldly, "but I can." Suddenly, a heavy boot struck the pirate leader's back, slamming him into the dust. An infantryman seized the creature by its gray fur, hauling it back up while pressing a blade to its throat. Finally, the leader spoke in fluent human tongue. What do you want to know?" Kandor smiled, but the pirate leader's ferocity flared once more. Seeing the creature's lingering rage, Kandor signaled his men. An iron-plated sheath swung through the air, shattering the jackalman's fangs and tearing its lips. Enraged, the leader lunged toward the steps, but a Swadian shield-bearer stepped forward. With a heavy thud, the soldier blocked the charge and delivered a crushing right hook that sent the leader flying. Spitting blood and teeth, the broken pirate leader finally crawled back to kneel in despair. Kandor descended the steps, leaning in close. "Tell me when your main force arrives, and I swear on my honor, I will not kill you." The promise of life was a powerful lure. 7 days, the leader rasped. "We are the vanguard. The expeditionary force reaches the southern Naran Desert at the start of next month." Satisfied, Kandor ordered the prisoners taken away, even offering them bread and dried meat as a reward. One captive, desperate for survival, even offered to defect. As the courtyard cleared, Kandor's smile vanished. He turned to his trusted advisors. "Fatties and Manhwa, the true war was coming. In 7 days, Kandor said, his voice echoing in the hall, we face our true enemies. Prepare the men. We must know everything before the desert turns to blood."